I'm a 20-year-old man who moved out of my parents' house at 18 because I could no longer stand living with them. My parents were tough to deal with, always favoring my younger siblings and using me as free childcare whenever they could. They treated me like I didn't deserve any independence, constantly reminding me that what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine. When I finally left, my dad sarcastically told me not to let the door hit me on the way out and said not to come back. I found the smallest and cheapest apartment I could afford, and for the past 2 years, I've been working full-time to support myself. My parents couldn't last even a month before calling me, begging me to come back home. Without me, they had no one to watch my siblings. I refused their request because, for the first time in my life, I was able to enjoy my independence. Later, my dad called and demanded that I move back home to help with expenses by paying rent. He claimed that family was more important than my personal independence. I argued that my life was important too, and I was finally living for myself. He angrily hung up, telling me to see how long I could last without them. Months passed without contact, but I managed just fine. Over time, my parents reluctantly accepted that I wasn't coming back. They occasionally begged me to watch my youngest siblings, even though my 2 teenage siblings were perfectly capable of helping. However, my parents refused to ask them for help the way they had with me. When I pointed out their hypocrisy, they resorted to gaslighting me, which always led to long periods of silence. Despite this, they were the ones who eventually came crawling back for help. Recently, I bought myself a used Nintendo Switch. I couldn't afford many games, so I just had Mario Kart, which came bundled with the console. One Saturday, my mom showed up at my apartment unannounced and pushed my 2 youngest siblings through the door, saying I needed to watch them. Before I could protest, she left, and I was stuck with 2 rowdy kids in my tiny apartment all day. She didn't return until after 9 p.m., and that was only because I called and demanded she pick them up. When she arrived, I told her I wouldn't be babysitting again unless she paid me up front. I warned her that if she ever left my siblings at my door without permission, I would call the police. She didn't take my warning seriously. The next morning, I realized my Nintendo Switch was missing. When I called my parents, they admitted that one of my siblings had taken it. I told them I was coming over to get it back immediately, but my mom dismissed me, saying my youngest sibling was playing with it and she didn't have the heart to take it away. I told her it was stolen and I wanted it back. I rode my bike to their house and found my sibling crying because the Switch's battery had died and they didn't have the charger. I asked for it back, but my dad took it from me and said I could only have it back if I agreed to help with babysitting. I stood my ground, warning them I would involve the police if my dad refused to listen. When my dad didn't budge, I pulled out my phone and started dialing. My mom, panicked, grabbed the Switch from my dad and handed it back to me. My dad called her a traitor, but she insisted it wasn't worth the legal trouble. Before I left, I warned them that if anything like this happened again, I wouldn't hesitate to call the police first. My dad shouted at me as I walked out, demanding I face him like a man, but I ignored him. Since then, my parents have mostly stopped talking to me, which is fine by me. My mom texted once asking me to babysit, but I told her I would only do it if she paid me in advance. I also made it clear that I wouldn't tolerate any theft or manipulation again. They haven't contacted me since, and I'm okay with that. I've made it clear that I'm an adult with my own life, and they need to respect that. The story begins with a seemingly small but symbolic act. The narrator taking a turkey leg off the platter during a holiday gathering and leaving with it to eat at home. This moment, though trivial, marks the start of a larger rift in the narrator's relationship with their family. Since then, only their siblings have reached out, joking that the narrator walked out like a boss. The family's mood shifts, and running jokes about the father's poor behavior emerge, referencing the tension in the house and a long-standing history of conflict. This narrative of separation extends to the narrator's decision to spend Christmas with a friend's family instead of their own, showing a deeper estrangement. The friend's family even offers a standing invitation for future holidays, which further emphasizes the narrator's disconnection from their parents. The narrator then reveals a significant piece of family history, the loss of their mother's pregnancy in March 2023. The parents had blamed the narrator for this loss, claiming it was their fault for not returning home when the family needed them. This further intensified the tension, as the parents refused to acknowledge their own role in the strained relationship. Eventually, it was revealed that the mother had been expecting their sixth child, and the parents had been pressuring the narrator to move back during Thanksgiving. At the time, they hadn't disclosed the pregnancy, but now it was clear they were trying to manipulate the narrator into returning to help with childcare. The mother's pregnancy had been kept secret, with the parents hoping the narrator would step in as a free babysitter, without considering the emotional toll this would cause. The narrator suspects this pressure was directly linked to the mother's pregnancy, and their parents' desperation to have them return only highlights the unhealthy family dynamics. Things take a dramatic turn when the narrator's Reddit posts are discovered by a sibling, who then shows them to their parents. The parents are furious, accusing the narrator of airing the family's dirty laundry and publicly tarnishing their image as parents. During a confrontation at the narrator's apartment, the parents accuse the narrator of attempting to get the mother arrested and making them appear like terrible parents to the world. This leads to a heated argument where the narrator calls out the parents for their neglect, including leaving younger siblings at their apartment door while the narrator was working. The parents react defensively, with the father physically threatening the narrator. The narrator stands their ground, pointing out that the father's actions prove them right, that their parents were indeed bad parents. The father tries to intimidate the narrator with threats of violence, but this is not the first time the father has resorted to physical aggression. However, the narrator is no longer scared and makes it clear that if the father attempts to strike them, it will end the same way as their previous confrontation, when the narrator kicked him in the groin. The father winces at the thought of this, and the parents leave, but not before blaming the narrator for the fine they had to pay for child abandonment. The narrator rejects this accusation, telling the parents that they owe them nothing. In the following months, the narrator learns that their mother lost a baby due to a fall at home. She slipped on wet porch steps, which had been in disrepair for years, and landed face first on the gravel. The narrator reveals they hadn't even known about the pregnancy, as the mother's weight made it hard to detect. Despite the tragic loss, the parents' response is to place blame on the narrator. The mother, already grieving, looks for someone to blame, and the narrator becomes the target of her anger. The narrator points out that the father's failure to repair the porch was a direct cause of the fall, but the mother ignores this and instead blames the narrator for not coming home to help. The situation escalates when the father physically attacks the narrator. However, this time, the narrator is ready. They've been working out and are much stronger than when they last faced their father. The narrator defends themselves, and the confrontation ends with the father severely injured, suffering a broken nose and missing teeth. The police are called, but thanks to security footage and a recording from the narrator's phone, the incident is ruled as self-defense. Though shaken, the narrator is legally cleared of any wrongdoing. Despite this, the parents threaten to sue the narrator for the medical bills resulting from the father's injuries. The father, unable to work for some time, is particularly upset about his appearance and the fact that his beard had to be shaved off due to the injuries. Despite the ongoing tension, the narrator begins to feel empowered. They have a new job lined up that pays better than their previous one and are looking forward to moving into a better apartment. It seems that the family struggles will no longer be the narrator's responsibility. The narrator's siblings, meanwhile, have mixed feelings about the situation. The eldest sibling calls the narrator a hero for standing up to the father, but the sibling who found the Reddit post regrets their actions, especially after seeing their mother's anger. They apologize for letting the parents find out about the post and express discomfort with the current situation. Both siblings admit that at first, they blame the narrator for leaving, but they've since realized that once you become an adult, you should be able to make your own choices. They resent the burden of childcare they've had to take on for their parents, and are grateful that the narrator no longer feels obligated to care for them. Despite these apologies, the parents remain defiant. The father, still angry, threatens the narrator with violence again, this time brandishing a knife. The narrator, however, stands their ground, telling the father that they will be filing for a restraining order and that if he ever harms the siblings again, they won't hesitate to call the authorities. The narrator leaves the house one final time, saying goodbye to their parents and making it clear that they are done with them. The final words spoken to the father are a warning. If he ever hurts the siblings, the consequences will be severe. The narrator's decision to confront their parents and sever ties with them marks a major turning point. They no longer feel indebted to the family and are determined to protect their siblings from further harm. They also vow to move forward with their life, focusing on their own future and well-being. The story ends with the narrator preparing to file for a restraining order and begin a new chapter, free from the toxic and abusive environment they've endured.